I had at least 2 videos planned that I was actively working on. After all my raving about the Konica Hexar AF recently, I wanted to find a way of touching on the few but frustrating downsides to this little box of metal and glass. What I came up with was shooting one roll of film at a time with a specific technique that pressed me right up against those traits, and ideally I'd make away with a few or one interesting picture to then be able to re-examine if that really was a weak point, or more likely my own inability. My own version of a gaming challenge run video. The first of these challenge rolls I came up with was to shoot a roll with the focus set to 0.6 meters, the minimum focusing distance. This came through some skewed logic that, since I'm always getting frustrated about trying to get close-up details, leaning in close and always having to pull back from the subject, that green blinking bastard in the viewfinder, this would be a kind of self-patronizing way of saying, oh, you want to get close, huh? Set the camera to 60 centimeters, no taking it off, and go and make something good. And like I said, I set it up, I went out to film and tried to make it work. The concept sounds fun, and I admit if I hadn't forced myself to try and only shoot this way, there's a few pictures I took which I like that I'm sure I wouldn't have made otherwise. Whether that would have been from missing it by deliberating too long on how to approach the scene, or how to frame, or simply by not perceiving something that close up to me. But there's a conflict I feel every time I hit out like this, and I can't help but weigh up what it is I like about photography and the opposing approach of operating with a gimmick in order to make this content, turning that thing I like into an act for entertainment. I'm not referring to the refinement of shooting only at close focus. I enjoy the limitations and the ambiguity of varying technique. Shooting close especially offers so many interesting situations. You can get involved in your pictures, and interaction isn't something to avoid and can instead create a certain collaboration. The part that makes me feel like a joke is having that POV cam strapped to my head like I'm someone taking pictures for Google Street View. Theoretically, I could still make good pictures with this video camera attached to me, and many photographers move through the streets with much more equipment than I do. Even just having an SLR would total a higher weight than the combination of the Hexar and the head cam. What it does to me though, and how I start to perceive myself when I'm recording with that camera, is that of someone who's working on something beyond the space that I'm inhabiting. And it's easy to think, well, even if you just had your Hexar taking 35mm stills, you're going to need to take your film into the lab, wait a few days or weeks before you can get your results back. Walking around taking pictures, you're working on something that you hope eventuates in the future, right? Not exactly. For some, yes, it's about the image. I mean, that's the art. That's the piece that can be hung on the wall. That's the book. That's the proof that you are out there taking risks, following your instinct, reacting, getting sore feet. For me, photography sits closer to poetry, as described by Leonard Cohen in this quote that I've never been able to find the source for, so if you know, please let me know. I like to think of the image as only ash, an inevitable byproduct that facilitates the way of the photographer, that validates the flaneur to the outside witness and allows him to carry on relatively unobstructed down their path of obsessive observation. And within this analogy, a life burning well is not only fantastic views or rich carnal experiences, exclusivity or the subjectivity to visual spectacle like some Slim Aaron's pictures. A life burning well is a life interconnected. The obliteration or the ongoing process of dismissing the ego, the self, and separation from all other beings, molecules, and most of all time. As put so simply by Hermann Hesse, anyone knowing how to live for the moment, to live in the present as she did, treasuring every little wayside flower with loving care, and deriving value from every playful little instant, had nothing to fear from life. For me, this is the art. The camera is there to encourage. Like the Hexar AF, this romanticized view of the Tao of photography isn't without its flaws. Unlike other photographers who take pictures on the streets, I don't find as much satisfaction with just hitting out to take pictures. With this school of thought, the act of photography needs to come through feeling, not chance, my own spontaneity, letting things unravel as they may and being there along the way to act when I'm moved, If I head out specifically to take pictures, it begins to feel like a similar construction to photographing in a studio. No matter how unexpected a scene, subject, or action is, you might stumble across that you've been out there with your camera with intent. You have expected it, hoped for it, trying to find elements to press together. Even that alone, that intent to take pictures, begins to feel forceful. Although made with the eyes of love and a heart full with sentimentality, this approach ends up with me not making as much work or coherent thematic projects, personal or commercial, as others might outside of what I can jigsaw together later in the edit and arrangement. Don't get me wrong, the camera is with me at all times, and if I need to do anything, go from A to B, I will stretch that trip out and take the longest route possible. I'll find any excuse. The smallest task that pulls me closer to people and crowds I can amble through. Hell, we can bring this approach to sharing space with one singular person. Holidays, getaways with your partner, nights with lovers, nights running for your life, starvation, abundance, debauchery. Perhaps diarist is a more fitting designation than street photographer. The ongoing moment, one big project. On that note, I'll end with a few pictures and a fitting quote by maybe the greatest diarist of modern times, Nobuyoshi Araki, from his interview with Jerome Sanz in the foreword for his book, Araki by Araki.